Crusades. During the late 1000s, the Seljuk Turks, a Muslim people from Central Asia, gained control of Jerusalem and the area around it. Christians referred to this area as the Holy Land. Later, the Turks attacked the Byzantium Empire, which led to the Byzantine emperor to ask the Pope in Rome for help. In 1095, the Pope called a meeting of church leaders and feudal lords. This meeting marked the beginning of the Crusades. At least 10,000 European men joined the military mission to retake the Holy Land from the Muslims. The First Crusade lasted from 1096 to 1099. During this crusade, the Europeans recaptured Jerusalem. Other crusades during the 1100s and 1200s were less successful. By 1291, when the Crusades ended, the Muslims had regained control of the Holy Land. However, the Crusades brought many changes to Europe. These included the use of crossbows in warfare, increased trade between Italian cities and the Holy Land, and an increase in the power of European kings due to the number of nobles who died in the fighting. The nobles, therefore, were unavailable to challenge the king because they were off fighting. Life and culture. During the early period of the Middle Ages, very few people received an education. Those who were educated, mainly nobles and the clergy, were educated at monasteries and in churches. With the development of towns, other schools opened. Between the late 1000s and the late 1200s, 4 great universities opened, including ones in Paris and Oxford University in England. By the end of the 1400s, many more universities had opened. The main subjects that were studied in the universities were law, medicine, and theology. There were many changes in architecture during this period as well. In the mid-1100s, a new style of church emerged, Gothic. Gothic buildings were considered monuments to God, and Gothic cathedrals had tall spires, high walls, and rows of supports called flying buttresses on their outside walls. Every element of Gothic cathedrals reached toward heaven. The recovery of Greek texts was also a key event. Muslim scholars had kept the works of Greek and Roman philosophers such as Aristotle. Later, English philosophers would try to reconcile the ideas of Aristotle with those of the early church. This would lead to a new movement called scholasticism, which means an attempt to bring faith and reason together. One of the most famous English philosophers during the Middle Ages was Thomas Aquinas. His work summarized medieval Christian thought. The Black Death. Beginning in 1347, a plague called the Black Death swept through Europe. It began in Asia and was spread via rats on trading ships. Between 1347 and 1351, entire towns and villages were wiped out by the plague. Eventually, 1/3 of Europe's population died. This caused people to question their faith in God, and the church lost some of its power and influence. Since available workers were harder to find, workers began to demand higher wages. This led to peasant uprisings throughout Europe.